conversation with State Representative Ron Copeland. Ron, good to have you with us.
Good morning. I'm excited to be back home.
And session being somewhat over. You just
over.
never know what the governor's going to call, but it's been a busy session. I think I read there's 2,058 bills submitted and about 55 got passed or something
Yeah,
like that.
I guess we could say 55 got passed, but if you look at all the bills that were added to some of the bills, you could probably add it up. But yeah, total about 55, and a lot of bills get filed that don't get heard or get tweaked. Yeah, it's been busy.
So let's discuss that for a minute before we go over some of
Sure.
these things that got passed in the legislature. Is that a lot of times people submit legislation, it's not strong enough to make it on its own, so it ends up getting attached to a different bill, just tacked on, that looks like it's going to be able to get through, and then then the negotiations start to begin, don't they?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Kind of leading into that, we didn't discuss this earlier, but since I've been there, I've had. I guess I'll turn that off. Since I've been there, I've had two actual bills that I filed that made it to the Senate calendar, but they've never been brought up to be heard in the Senate. But them bills were actually bills that I filed that ended up getting attached to other similar like bills. For instance, like last year, I had a bill for logging industry,
Right.
and that's an agricultural type business in the state, especially in our area, and it got attached as an amendment to the agricultural bill.
Okay.
So I mean, it was similar in nature, that didn't violate the Constitution about not being similar to the bill. So that's kind of how that happens. We just got to watch and make sure somebody tries to add a bill that has nothing to do. If we're talking about taxes and somebody puts a sewer bill on, that's not germane to that bill. But that happens a lot. It makes the process kind of go a little faster. But I've had more complaints from constituents that you get a bill and there's 30 things attached to it. It's very frustrating because about probably 25 of them are really good, productive bills, and 5 wouldn't pass on their own. That's what's frustrating about that process. But yeah, that's how that happens.
So sometimes a good bill can enhance a bill that gets attached to, and sometimes it can drag it down.
Well, yeah, we had no education bills this year come to the floor. We had them, discussed them and whatnot, but none actually got voted on and out. The teacher salary is a win-win. Everybody thinks our teachers need more pay. I agree with that. But they're trying to attach a bunch of other stuff, open enrollment, charter school stuff, a lot of other issues that affect my district. I want teachers to have more pay, but it's going to affect our schools in other ways, and I have to vote yes or no on that, and that becomes an issue. When does the teacher's salary be more important than the other bad things being added? So that's what you get into as far as the amendments. They add bad things to good things because they know the bad thing won't get passed. So you'll see me vote present on things when it's not good enough to
Support.
say yes, and it's not bad enough. I don't want to vote no on it. I might vote present. And people say that's not what I'm there for. No, I'm there not to vote on bad things, and I'm not there to vote no on good things. I mean, so that's kind of where I'm at on that present vote.
And these are decisions that are really hard to make, too, because, yes, you'd like to see our teachers make more money, but also you realize that some of these things that could hurt like charter schools take students away when you're getting paid back upon average daily attendance. If that daily attendance goes down, how can you give teachers more money when you're going to lose money in your state funding? I mean, something doesn't sound right there.
Yeah, you're right. I'm in a position of 163 in the House, and working with the new freshman and sophomore classes, trying to see how we can make things different. I'd love to see a one bill get voted on and move forward, and if mine gets voted down, so be it. Let's move on to the next one. But everybody wants their stuff to pass, especially at the end of the session. You see amendments on things, and public safety bills. If it's a bail reform and it's good for the police and things like that, I don't see it's an issue to have several things on one bill. So that's kind of where we're at on that. So, but yeah, there's a lot of. It's like a big chess game, I tell people up there. So.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about some of the bills that have gotten through the House, the Senate. They're going to the governor for his signature. Session ended last Friday, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so Now it's just kind of a wait and see game as they go through, and either he'll sign or he won't sign, or he'll go through a line item veto, correct?
Yeah, the line item veto is only on budgetary items. He
Right.
can't line item, like if a bill passed, public safety bill, that's not a line item. He has to
Sure.
veto the whole thing. That's where the governor gets some of the, if there's some bad things in there he don't like, he'll veto the whole bill. And then we either have to override that. But, yeah, now it's kind of a waiting game to see where he is on some of these things, especially the budget wise, because he has a group of people. Office administration looks at our budget to see where it's at. Then his people looks at it and see what's important to him, and try to cut waste out. That's his job, is to make sure we're not wasting money.
All right, so let's talk about Senate Bill 190.
190, I think, is going to be beneficial, especially to our seniors. That's one of the bills that we did pass, and it's on the governor's desk, and it alleviates state tax off of Social Security benefit. So if you're drawing Social Security, I don't know how much that would be, $30, $40 a month, but why we're giving you that money to live on, and then we're taxing you on that. So I think this is a good way to give the money back to the people and let them spend it, instead of us taking it and spending it some crazy way. Also, I won't say crazy, but sometimes the crazy stuff. It also, there's a property tax credit type thing on here. I want to make sure I get this right. I'll just read the first paragraph on this. Act authorizes a county to grant a property tax credit to eligible taxpayers, right? We're not mandating the county do that. It just gives them the eligibility to do that. And there's eligible taxpayers are defined as residents who are eligible for Social Security retirement benefits, are the owner of record, or have legal or equitable interest in the homestead, are liable for the payment of real property taxes on such homestead. So that's where it gives a specific what they can give a tax credit for. The one thing I wish I did know is what tax credit, how much the tax credit is. That could be up to the county. They may be able to do 10% to 50%, and I think they'll do that based on their income and what they have in the county. And I think that's a good way to let the counties make that decision. If they have a surplus, they can give that back. But that would be up to the voters to vote the people in that what they want. So
basically that decision will go through the county commission.
Well, the way I read it, authorizes the county to grant.
Right.
So they would have to look at their budget to make that decision to see what's our budget look like.
Right.
Can we give a tax credit and it would be directed towards the seniors. Them are the qualified people. It's not everybody at this point in time. There's always talk about, reducing the age farther down. As a Republican, I want to give more money back. I think we spend it better than the individuals spend it better than the government.
Sure.
So that I have no problem with that, but the county can make that decision. It's not a mandate, I don't want to mandate the counties do nothing. Sometimes that happens, and that's not the best way to do business.
But I want to make it clear to our listeners and the people watching, it would be up to the county commission, more than likely, since they're the fiduciary budget, holding people, you got your three commissioners, that they would make the determination if the county would, and then they could figure out what that rate would be.
Yeah, they just have to look at their budget and see where they're at and see how much it would be if the county could sustain the tax credit. So.
Okay, very good. So that's up to them. Very good.
And another bill we did do, it's a big talking point, the transgender type bill that went through the protecting girls' sports. Then both those bills passed the House, passed the Senate, and went to the governor's office. That was one of the bills that he would kind of not demanded, but he was very interested in, and he come to us and said that if we do not pass something on these two issues, we would go into special session. So that shows that we needed to protect our youth, from surgeries and hormone treatments up to the age of 18, right? Once you reach 18, you can make that decision, and I think we've talked about that before here on the radio, and then protecting girls' sports. They're not going to allow biological boys, to play against the girls, which seems to be common sense, and we shouldn't be going there. But that was another bill that passed, and I think them are very needed bills just to protect our youth, And I think I told you before I was on the committee when that got discussed, and we had a husband and wife come up and said their 21-month-old boy said he was a girl. It's hard for me to believe that a 21-month-old even understands what a boy and a girl are. I mean, so that person, them people would give them hormone treatment or surgery to their kid, right? Because of a 21st making that statement, So I mean, it not stopping it. When you become 18, you become an adult, you can make that decision, and then you can't hold that. We don't let minors vote. We don't let them buy guns. I mean, so we should not be able to allow them to, parents should make decisions, but sometimes it's, I don't understand that possibly. Why, if they're really that way, let's work them through the process till they're 18, and then if they want to make the transition, let them make that decision.
You can't turn the clock back, can you?
Yeah, no, and we had several people testify in committee that, their parents did that to them, and now they're regretting that happened. I mean, youth go through so many emotional ups and downs, and where am I at, where they're trying to figure out who they are, what they are. I think social media now plays a role in their group affiliation. They feel like they're kind of, a guy feels kind of fragile or, not masculine, and society may push him, hey, you're a girl, but you're really not. You're just a guy that has feminine characteristics, and he's called them tomboys. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't have to convert to a boy. I mean, by surgery, why we shouldn't. That's just something I think is a good stopgap. We need to treat them if they're having psychological issues, because they say suicide's a big issue in that group of individuals. But is that because they're so confused that they don't? Society's saying they're a boy, their parents are saying they're something else, and then they don't know, and they get confused. Instead of saying, hey, you're a girl or you're a boy, let's work through the process. You have these traits. When you get to be an adult, you can make that decision on your own, but work them to that process. Don't change them until they get to the age where they can make a vital decision.
And then peer pressure once you hit teen years. There's I always kind of call it subconscious bullying, because it's not somebody directly bullying you, but through innuendo, things of that nature, through another person, they're actually, I wish that person would do this and this and this. They put pressure on you that way to where you kind of feel inadequate, and it can eventually backtrack to possible suicidal thoughts, or making you feel inferior. There's no need to do that, but unfortunately our mind plays tricks on us at that age. We really don't understand, and all of a sudden we're trying to make decisions that probably don't need to be making at all.
And I think adults are not pandering, but catering to these thought processes and going with that, instead of just saying, no, this is what you should be believing, this is what you are, because we're confused. They're confused. They're trying to make that decision when they're 13, when they really haven't had the experiences of these.
Sure.
But that's one thing I think is going to be always a controversial issue. I sympathize with the groups of individuals that have them thought processes. I just think that we need to kind of hold back and wait till you're 18 to make that adult decision, and then you can't blame your parents or the hormones or the emotions during your teen years didn't make you do something that you regret later on in life.
And then that may actually cause other suicidal ideas, because you're not the person you really were.
Yeah, that's true. So it's just I heard testimony that got my heart from a dad that he was heartfelt. He loved his kid, and he didn't know what to do. He would have been like me. If I had the same situation, I would have been, I don't know what to do. I would have done exactly what he did. I would have never let them transgender over surgery or hormone treatment. We would have went to a doctor, psychologist, and say, hey, do we need medicine to treat the emotions that you're going through, until you get out of this stage. And then if they want to do that, then let them do it. I mean, not just do the ultimate change, because that you can't change back.
So sometimes it's hard to you can't do that balancing act without offending somebody one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, so them are probably the two bills there's other bills that pass the House that may affect our area a little bit more, but nothing out of the ordinary. The rest of the things, some of the things we'll talk about here in a minute, are actual things that I was able to accomplish this session, and I don't want to brag or nothing. I just want to make sure everybody knows what I do up there, and it is a process.
Well, it is, and the thing is, you are elected to represent this area, so that's what we hope that you're doing, looking out for things that affect our area.
Well, see,
That's the idea.
my last 2 years, I've been going to commission meetings, going to chamber meetings, and say, what do I can make them decisions myself,
Right.
but I want people to tell me what their needs are, right? And that kind of leads us into the next House Bill 19, right, which is capital improvements in the state, right? So through my process and this past year, I got contacted by the Salem Hospital about helping them find grant money, right? Well, being there my second year, I realized that, there is capital improvements in the state budget throughout the state for certain things,
Sure.
I think Texas County may have got $300,000 for something, and, different issues, different capital improvements. And after they sent me a memo that they needed money for certain upgrades, like their sewer, roofing thing, I went to our budget chair and asked for funding for our hospital, because our rural hospital is a valuable asset in our community. I thought that's one of the things that is very important. And I actually asked the budget chair in the House, and they actually put $1 million for our hospital, a 50-50 match type deal. So that is still in the budget. It went to the Senate. It stayed in the budget. Senator Brown helped keep that in the budget, so he had a vital role in that as well. And now it's on the governor's desk in the budget in House Bill 19. So, and then like we was talking earlier, the governor does have the right to line item budgetary requests, and this is a budgetary request. But after getting it in the budget, it's not over, right? I have to contact Office of Administration, because they look at the budget and see if it's a valid request.
Sure.
I've dealt with them, and I go back to the budget chair in the House and talk to them and give them information on what it's being used for. And I contact the governor's office again and saying, hey, this is in the budget. Do you have any questions? This is a vital need. It's $1 million is a lot of money to all of us, right? But in our scheme of $50 billion state budget, it's pittance. But for Salem, it's a vital improvement that's needed, and that's the kind of things that I said, this is something that's needed. Our emergency services, our ambulance, our emergency room, just what it provides for the district is essential, right? So it's not over once it gets in there. So even during interim, I'll probably contact the governor's office again before this bill comes up to make sure it's not sectioned out. So that's what I mean about it. Once you get it, it's a continuing process, and say, hey, this is needed, and whatnot on that.
And part of what you have done, and just to let people know, you actually went to the hospital, you met with administration out there, you toured the hospital, you saw what the problems were, you got documentation on the issues that are at hand. So you didn't walk in and just ask for the money blindsided and say, hey, I need $1 million.
Oh, no.
You went in there armed with plenty of ammunition to say this is why they need $1 million. And they need to be a vital part of our community, because you know how big a rural hospital is in a small town. You've seen plenty of them close already in the last few years. Some by COVID just shut down because when they got the money from Medicare, they couldn't pay it back. Others by attrition, they just don't have enough money to keep it going. We don't need more rural hospitals shutting down.
You're right. I mean, it is a vital need, and I think that was one of I have to make decisions. We got several healthcare facilities in Denton County, and they all provide a need, but sometimes you just got to figure out what I want to focus on. Next year it may be something else for healthcare in our district that I want to work on that will enhance our healthcare providers stuff here. So I mean, it's just we have to make them decisions, just like commissioners have to decide what road you're going to grade, right?
Right, absolutely.
I mean, so you have to pick and choose that. It's not that there's a lot of needs out there, but this one I thought was probably the most important that I could help in Salem to keep our health care and our hospital here. It's went through some bumps in the road. I see after touring, they've done great things. They're bringing great people in, great medical instruments in.
Sure.
I just think it was very enlightening to realize there's only 8% of that these healthcare people are fighting for, and if they take it away from our hospital, it goes down.
Sure.
So.
And the things that we're talking about repairing are things that have been there since day one.
Oh yeah, roof,
we're talking-
sewer.
yeah,
I mean, just they're basic capital improvements, and I think that's why I have a lot of faith that it'll stay in, because they did a very good job of saying this is what it's going to cost, and they wrote it down $538,000 and so much change.
yeah.
I mean, it was almost to the cents that they give me. So the governor and them can't say it wasn't well thought out and it wasn't just asking for something
Right.
and they're going to spend it on something else.
Right.
So, and the matching funds, that's the next thing. I think it's a 50-50 match. You know, once it gets signed, that's when it's time for us to sit down with the hospital, or me to sit down with the hospital. What matching funds do we need? Do we get them from the community? How do we do that? Do we get grant money to match that? Working with MRPC, there's money there. There's just a lot of things that sometimes matching funds can use, that you could use some of your assets
Sure.
that you have on hand. There's just a lot of different ways that I've learned in the last few years that matching funds can be used to get the matching funds for the improvements.
Possibly even doing some of the maintenance themselves.
Oh, they could. I mean,
Yeah,
they could.
so
I
it
don't.
could
I
be
don't know
done.
exactly how that works, but
I mean, right.
I'm not going to do all that until it's signed, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Once it's signed, then we'll work to figure out how that works out. So.
Well, that's a great thing for our hospital, so that's fantastic. Senate Bill 24, a little bit about our public safety.
Yeah, the next few bills we'll talk about are some of these are actual bills that I filed as House bills.
Okay.
And it's like we was talking earlier, some bills get through that never get my name on it, right? And, you know, I'll give Frank Barnett's a shout out on this thing. He told me as long as I don't need my name on something, you can get a lot done in Jeff City. You know, if I fought and said this has to have my name on, this is my bill, it just doesn't, it's very difficult,
I
right?
mean, a big ego trip.
It's
huh?
ego. So, and I don't need my name on something, you know, as long as I can get the same language on Senator Brown's bill or Senator Edslinger's bill, and it passes, I've done what you've asked me to do, represent the community. So the next few bills are actual bills that I filed that never made it as a bill in my name, but I added them as a minute. But public safety, you know, trooper 28 years, a lot of people come to me and ask me to carry some public safety issues, right?
Sure. And you're very familiar with those.
Yeah, well, and yeah, I am very well. I am on some of them. So I try to stay within that lane. You know, there's a lot of reps, and I'm not bashing them. They'll carry anything and everything. You know, any from railroad to DOR to grasshoppers and this thing, or you know. And I'm thinking, they not bashing, but it's like I want to stay within my lane. I want to know what I'm talking about when I get up and testify or present a bill. I mean,
Absolutely.
it goes a long way. But the first one would be Senate Bill 2024, and that was, I think, Bernsketter's bill, Senate bill. It's Senate Bill 24, and that's a public safety bill that went through, and it dealt with a lot of public safety issues. A lot of it dealt with mental health issues with first responders. I mean, we're seeing a drastic increase in suicide and issues because of the things that they deal with, the stress they deal with. And I know I went through that, right? And my wife's told me I've changed since I left. You know, we always hold a lot of things in, you know, and I was asked by the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, to carry a PTSD bill. And what it did, and it was in its amendment, we brought it forward after when we saw this going forward, it just made PTSD an occupational disease. Right now, there's no workman's comp claim for if I'm a police officer or a firefighter and I have some traumatic events in my life, in working the job, there's no way I get fired or I have to quit and I go on disability or something, right? So they're kind of changed that to where there's a process to where, you know, the agency has peer reviews or incident management classes and to try to focus on some of the traumatic events.
Absolutely.
You know, in my career, and we have Police Week up there every week honoring Memorial Police Week. Last year I give my speech, and it was very difficult for me to talk about. I won't go into detail because I might break down here. But, you know, I remember the 10-year-old boy that drowned up north. I remember the 12-year-old girl I pulled out of a car. I remember the first death notification. I'm going to stop because I can't go no farther. So I know how that affects people. I was just the lucky one that I was able to hold it in and manage through that. But there's some police officers and firefighters that go through these traumatic events and it affects them differently, right? So we want to have a way that they can actually be treated and not be treated like they can't do the job. Each one of us is different, and just a way that they can work through that process. And if they do have PTSD, we have it in the military, that, you know, we don't want somebody out there has a traumatic incident and it affects the way they manage the job, especially a policeman, right? They're stressed out and they can't do the job when we call them. So this kind of just goes in that route to gives an out for workman's comp claim to get them over that and go through the process. So I think that's a good step in the right direction for our police and firemen.
You know, sometimes, Ron, I think people forget that highway patrol officers and firefighters are people just like us. And they have feelings, and you can't tell me, yeah, you're in a situation, it's a job you do, but you're going to come across something that's going to affect you one way, shape, or form that you're not comfortable with. It's going to happen somewhere in all the years that you're a patrol officer, or if you're a firefighter, you're going to come across something you're going to see or feel or hear. And, you know, people say it gives you the weebie-jeebies. It does. There's just something about that one that might just set you off. And this is a great bill to help protect those people.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I can remember the first fatality I worked. I can remember the 2 fatalities I worked where I knew the people.
Yeah, that's hard.
And it's just, we hide it because we want to do the job. And if you show your emotions, they think you can't do the job. Mm-hmm. But since in 92 I started, there was nothing like peer review or incident counseling, right? Through the 28 years I was there, the patrol actually started doing peer counseling. So when you go to when we sent troopers to Joplin after the tornado, they saw some horrific things.
Oh, God, yes.
So they brought them back and had to sit down afterwards and talked about the issues and what issues they had with that, you know, and tried to work them through that process. That wasn't here in 92. You know, we were, I don't want to say it, but you couldn't handle it. Just go do your job. Shut up and go do your job, you know. But we're seeing now that, you know, people do have emotions, and we do have emotions. So, but it's a good step in the right direction.
Very good, very good. Okay, so very good. So another one, SB 28.
SB 28 and SB 40 are Senate bills again that I had. These are 2 bills I actually had in the House, and one of them was House Bill 677 and House Bill 669, and that's the Child Advocacy Division. We have a Child Advocacy Division in Jeff City, and the director came to me because they had an incident last year where they had a hotline tip, right? And the lady had kidnapped her daughter.
Okay.
Well, there was a law that says they couldn't release that information to the police. So it took them about 4 or 5 hours to go through the process to release the information of the caller to the police so they could get this kidnapped person back. So it's crazy, right? It was just crazy.
Yes.
So this bill was very non-controversial when I brought it up. All it does is says that the Child Advocacy Division, and they only deal with children in the custody of the state, right? Okay, so sure. They should be able to release this information to law enforcement. So basically it was one sentence change in the statute that says the Child Advocacy can release information about a case for the safety of the child without being a crime. So that one change took me all session to get done, right? And that was actually the bill that went to the Senate that was on the calendar to be heard. So, I mean, that one made it just never got heard. But that got added to Senate Bill 28, which is a public safety kind of bill as well. And RATBAC, if nobody knows what RATBAC is a database where school teachers, child care people, police bus drivers have to get fingerprinted to work for their employer, right? Mm-hmm. Because them are vital positions that people have trust in them positions. Sure. And that database, all it does is you get fingerprinted, and if you go commit a crime in another state or in another city and you get fingerprinted, that information will automatically go back to your supervisor of where you're working. So if I'm working for a school district I've been fingerprinted and I go commit a crime in Florida, get fingerprinted, that will hit the superintendent, and the superintendent can call me in, and not saying you're fired, but it just gives the superintendent knowledge that they've got someone working in their division or they're underneath them that committed a crime. And do we suspend them with pay? What do we do with them? What's the crime, right? Same with police. If you have a policeman going to another state committing a crime, we don't want them coming back to our community policing our people.
Sure.
So that rat back program, that passed last year. I got that passed for police officers last year. But there was a fix that every 6 years, teachers had to go get fingerprinted again, and that was a $45 fee. It was just an expense that we wanted to get rid of. So we just took the 6 years out. So once you're fingerprinted once and you still work for the same agency, you don't have to go back every 6 years. That was a way to fund the program. So let's take that out. It's a public safety issue. So them two are actually bills I filed in the House, but they got added to Senate bills, and they relate to the bills themselves.
So a lot of what you're telling me is these bills get passed, and they're good bills, but sometimes they need a little tweaking. And a couple of these things that you're telling me is we have found something that was omitted that needed to be added that would make this bill better, or make the law better. And that's what you're really doing. You're finding out in real life sometimes these bills, we have a great bill, but then when you put it in practical use in real life, you find out we probably should have done this.
Yeah. I mean, that right back bill was just it said 6 years. That's all I took out of that bill, right? That's all that was. I mean, but it took me all session to do that, right? One sentence for the child advocacy to fix that issue. It didn't add an expense to the state.
No.
It just made it easier. It didn't violate anybody's constitutional rights or anything. It just made it easier. So some of these are just none of these are the major bill here that there's only two on here, and that would be the PTS bill, which was a drastic change from what we had in the past.
Right.
Because it's moving to the mental health issues moving forward in everything we do.
Sure.
So that was probably the most drastic. But them two there was pretty easy fixes, and they just need to be fixed to make it better for safety of the children and to not make an expense for teachers and people that get fingerprinted every 6 years.
But I think the point I was trying to make is even to make those easy fixes.
Oh, yeah.
The work you have to do to go through just to make those easy
yeah.
fixes. It's not just saying, hey, guys, we need to add this line or scratch this line because it doesn't make any sense in this situation, okay? Why don't we have that in there? Well, yeah, you're right, Ron. We need to do that. Well, okay. So as you walk away, nothing's going to get done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to follow up on it. So there's a lot of work just to get a minor change made to a law or to maybe just correct an oversight that was actually done.
And it has to be done both in the Senate and House.
Right.
I can change it in the House, and it goes over to the Senate, and it hasn't been heard in the Senate, then the language could change. It have to come back to us, right, if they change something. So, I mean, usually what I've tried to do is work with a senator, Brown, Esslinger, Bean, Holly Rader, all them people that say, hey, this ratback bill, would you have the same language in the Senate where they carry that bill? Sure. So if you have the same language in the House and Senate, say the Senate hears it and the House hears it, the same language, it's much easier to get through because both bills have heard it. If they haven't heard it in the Senate and it comes over as an amendment, that's when they say, oh, we haven't heard this, and they'll jerk it out. So I mean, it is a process to work with both houses for that to get done.
So, and that's what we're trying to bring out in these interviews is it's not just as cut and dry as I think people think. You just run up to Jeff City, make a few votes, and it's done. That's not the case at all, and it takes a lot of not only maybe initiative to get things on there, but then the follow-up on it and the follow-through that you have to do and to make sure that everybody's still on board before it comes up in the House or the Senate just to make sure everybody's still doing it. People have to realize this is a job that you've got to have a little intestinal fortitude on, say, hey, this is the right thing to do.
Well, my House Bill 54, which isn't on our sheet, it just modifies relating to speed limits on county roads, right?
Common sense, right?
Yeah, I didn't even get that heard. I mean, I didn't even get the speaker to refer it to committee, and the commissioners were wanting that, you know, to change from 50 to 40.
Sure.
I mean, I didn't even get that heard, so I'll have to file that next year to say, hey, this is something that's important that we can change it saves the county lots of money because they don't have to post every speed limit on there that it's
Right.
at 40. So, I mean, I didn't even get that heard. So and that's just in statute, you just slash out 50 and you put 40 in that spot. And I didn't even get that heard. So it's just, I don't understand that. That was a simple fix. But
You know, and people don't understand, and that is the law, 50 miles an hour on county roads, unless
Gravel.
it is
yeah,
posted.
you're right.
And you know, there's a lot of gravel
Maybe
roads.
we
you
shouldn't be
wouldn't-
telling everybody that, right?
Well, maybe not, but I think there has to be a little common sense, because some of the curves we have in Denton County on the gravel road, you do not want to take at 50 miles
I
an
agree.
hour.
Now, you'd see an eye, you'd be charged on that, but, you know, still, it still needs people will go the speed limit if it's 50. you
Sure.
know, and they're thinking
Well,
it's-
usually a little bit more than the 50 anyway, but nonetheless, but yeah, so I just want to kind of, I'm glad you brought that up, because I just want people to understand, it's not just a one and done. This is one and one and one and one, and you start back here on day one, and you may fight for it all the way through the end of session.
And we'll talk about some of them bills later on.
Okay.
We'll get to some of them that
All
we're
right,
working
very
on.
good. Let's move on a little bit to SB 138.
And that was an ag bill, an agricultural bill, and we talk about fixes. Last year, I had a local log truck license plate fix on weights and made it easier. I got that passed on log bill. But there was I made a mistake, not a mistake, but I didn't include these logging industries that were investing in safer equipment.
Okay.
So I put 15,000 pounds on the front steer axle. Some of these trucking companies are buying these 22.5 heavy-duty steer axles, and the truck is weighing more than, last night I talked to a guy, his truck weighs 32,000, truck and pup, right? These guys that are investing in these heavy-duty trucks, they might weigh 42, right? So they're 10,000 more, but they're investing in safer equipment. So basically, it just changed the front steer axle issue. If you have a 20,000 or 22.5 front steer axle, you're allowed to carry that on the front steer axle, so it's not going to affect that. So I didn't want to punish the guys. After talking to some of the logging industry and some people in the industry, I was kind of punishing them guys that were spending extra money on these heavier trucks, getting to carry less logs, right? And it doesn't affect the safety. If it would have affected safety, I wouldn't have done it. But it was just a quick fix on the front steer axle. And it was just one change to it, one little change on there. But that was easy because people understand, I understand that. And by explaining it on the floor, everybody knew what I was talking about because I hit every point. And it was just a fix to help them guys that were investing in safer equipment. You don't want to punish them guys.
No. And here's the thing. You know, you look at the state of Missouri, okay, the southern half has a lot of timber. The northern half does not have a lot of timber. So you're probably talking to some people when you're starting to talk about the timber industry that aren't even that familiar with it, that would say, well, that doesn't really have any play for me. Well, you're going to be using our wood products. Yeah, it does.
$40 billion business, over 37,000 people somehow are related to the forestry industry in Missouri, and probably a lot of that is in our area.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to focus on I want to focus on what will bring revenue and jobs to our area. So
And secure their workforce, because, you know, like you're saying, though, if all of a sudden the trucks that they're using start getting violations because it's not in the bill or it's not a law, you know, then you're wondering, why did I buy this truck? Why did I make that a major investment? And how do I get my money back?
well, them guys are investing in it because it's safer, but they can't haul as many logs because it's heavier, it's heavier all around. So it just makes sense to not punish people who are trying to do the right thing, right?
Right. Senate Bill 186.
That's another public safety bill, and I have child advocacy, the bill we talked about earlier, got added to that as an amendment. That's a public safety issue, right? And then bail reform. I mean, I've been working on bail reform for the last 2 years, and basically, kind of make it simple, the Supreme Court several years back made a decision that you have to consider, made a ruling, you have to consider the economic status of the individual that committed the crime. Okay? So what's happened over the last few years, the courts have been Now, I don't think our courts here in Dent County have been doing this, right? They're still looking at the overall safety of the community and what the person's like before they set bail.
Right.
But throughout the state, these judges have been saying, oh, he can't afford bail, so we're going to release him, right? Because they can't afford it. That they were looking at the economic status of the individual that committed the crime more importantly than some of the other things that I thought should have been done. And the Supreme Court made a decision, that's a ruling. The Supreme Court also said the state can mandate requirements in that same ruling.
Okay.
But the courts were going with economic status, especially in the metropolitan areas. And what was happening is they were releasing these people on OR bonds, on release, right? And they were going out and committing other crimes. They'd come back again, they were poor, couldn't afford it, they would release them again. So we wanted to put regulations and statute that said and my bill is a one-page bill, and it was a 20-page bill from the previous rep, but it just says the courts have to consider the safety of the community first, the possibility of the individual reoffending, and then any other thing that should be applicable. So you can consider his economic status, but
Sure.
the first thing in statute means you have to consider, if you're a sex offender or this, and that are more serious, and you had to consider them things, and we can put that in statute. The Supreme Court said the state can make rules or statutes for that. So that's what we had to do, is the ruling to make sure it's in state statute instead of just a ruling, because they was going by the Supreme Court ruling because they didn't want to violate a ruling. So
Right.
now it's in state statute. If the governor signs this, which I think he is, I don't think that's a controversial public safety bill.
He was in public safety at one
Well, he
time.
was. He was a
anyway.
sheriff.
Yeah.
Yes, he was. So that was something that I worked on for 2 years, and finally it got. Hopefully that'll get through, and it's just a verbiage. It doesn't cost the state any money. There's nothing in that I filed that costs the state money. Well, it's maybe the House Bill 19, but that's money coming back to the community,
Sure.
But as far as what it costs extra people or anything like that, it's not. So that's kind of, I try to stay within that realm if I can. I don't want to cost the state money if I don't have to.
Busy time, isn't it? Busy
It is,
time.
and I've learned a lot those last few years. It's the first time I asked for funding, right? And it was, I don't want to take money because I think we should be giving it back. But if I don't ask, like I said before, a lot of that money will go to St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbia. They'll ask for millions and millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions, right? And we have needs too, and we shouldn't. I just would rather have us give it back, but if it's there, I think I should ask for it for the needs of our community. So,
Well, everybody needs to share in the pot equally, and we understand it. There's every part of the state of Missouri has needs, but sometimes I think rural hospitals and also transportation, I think, and there's some transportation big bills out there for I-70
oh yeah,
and the 44 study, and also the broadband expansion. I mean, there's a lot of money set aside for this. We've seen a lot of money thrown at broadband expansion already. It's been wasted, just wasted money.
there's no accountability.
No, that's exactly. And so when people hear that term anymore, Ron, I'm not sure they even buy into it. That, well, what are we going to do with the money this time? We've done that 3 or 4 times already, and I still don't have internet. I still don't even have cell service in parts of the Mark Twain National Forest, which is true. You don't have it, and some areas are still don't have it.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's talk a little bit about the future. At one time I think we made mention, and you had made mention to us that there needs to be a lot of improvements in our state parks. We have some beautiful state parks in our area. One of
Yes.
those is one of the most used state parks that we have in Montauk State Park. However, facilities down there, we talk about aging. Those facilities are aging, aren't they? And they've been affected by some floods to where they may actually be, well, I'm not saying they are, but they may actually have some compromisation done to them.
Yeah, last year we were talking about this, and we were looking at deferred maintenance throughout the state. When they were looking for new funding for different places. Like we talked last time, the shiny new nickel. Everybody wants the new thing, but they forget about what we have, right?
Right.
Montauk, for instance, had $1.5 million worth of deferred maintenance, right? That they to get them up to par. I mean, you're always going to have deferred maintenance. It's for regular upkeep.
Sure.
But I'd love to see a a new lodge, kind of like Echo Bluff, what would that do for our district? I got some studies that show that over 600,000 people visit Montauk a year. I mean, over $20,000 worth of tax income has come to the Dent County through Montauk. That's not from the other businesses that come to Salem. That's just from Montauk itself. It's not a study. That's DNR's money that they give to the county. So, an investment in a new lodge or something like that I think would be, especially with these funds that are coming from the federal government, they want to invest in projects that are going to be here forever, right? So if you can invest in a new lodge, that would be 30, 40 years of investment for a one-time investment, and that'll bring money back to the community for years and years and years and years. They're wanting that's what I think they're trying to do with some of this money, and I asked for that for last 2 years, working with DNR on them issues. I don't know if anybody's aware, the MDC runs the trout park down at Montauk, and that's scheduled right after they redo Bennett. Montauk is next on the list, so it would be nice to get a new lodge and upkeep there, as long with the trout park improvements. At one time, we would have an amazing new park in Dent County. I mean, they're putting a Loop 5 in, campsite too. They're working on that now. So that's an investment I would like to work towards and see if we can get that done for our area.
A new park that's an old park.
Yeah. Somebody said, it is, but it's a very nice park. If
it's a
600,000 plus people visit that a year, just think if we had a lodge that could have conferences. I mean, have a conference room. I've had many commissioners and people throughout the state. If they had a lodge like Echo Bluff has, they would have conferences there where you got trout fishing there, and all that stuff. So I think it would pay dividends back to the community in the long run if we try to work towards that instead of buying a new park somewhere else.
Absolutely.
So
Our try. And there's going to be upgrades done to Current River State Park and their lodge down there too. So, if you're starting to do that to one state park, why not just do it to all those? Especially Montauk's been around for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an investment that needs to be looked at.
Absolutely. So
and some of the things that I followed the past few years that I think are very should be involved in our community is a 20% bill. That means if the government owns more than 20% of land in a county, before they could purchase or acquire any more, they have to go to the county commission. That's an uphill battle for me. There's only like 8 counties in the state that have that 20%, but most of them are very economic depressed, and tourism does have effect, but I think overall, land is economic stimulus. So if the government owns most of the land, the economic stimulus goes down from capitalism, right? The government can keep pushing money, but that's money we're paying taxes and they're putting back in. But if people own land, they invest, they build houses, the property tax goes up. I mean, not goes up, but you pay property tax, and
assessments go up.
It just puts back into the community going forward. That's one I'm going to work on again. Natural resource bill is another one I'm going to file, working on that one. And that one is just basically where state agencies cannot sell our natural resources in the state and keep that money. One agency last year made $6 million worth of timber sales on state property.
Right.
I think that's an injustice, in my opinion. I think that they logged Indian trails up here. And the amount of money that they got was $173,000, basically. I'm going to throw it in numbers so people can understand. That's what that's the state's portion. The way my bill would work is that if a state agency actually took timber or mining issues or dirt or anything off of that, 25% of that would go back to the agency for administrative costs. I understand that, they can't just do it for free. 25% would go to the school district, so R4 would have got $43,000 roughly, right? Their part for that timber sales, and the rest would come back to the county to pay for essential services, which your property tax picks up for. They would have made $86,000 roughly $1,000 off that timber sales at Indian Trails. And that's pittance compared to what's going on in Shannon County.
Yes.
There's $2 million worth of timber states took out in their part for 3 years. And if you look at Shannon County, they're economically, there's 42% of the land owned by the government down there.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not I'm not against what these state agencies do. I just think sometimes they overreach and they don't look at what's best for the community in which they buy the land. You know, they're getting more and more. They just got Peck Ranch, 5,600 more acres in Carter County. I mean, so that's land we can't build on and
Can't touch.
it's PILT money. So it's just, at what point do we say, hey, this is hurting our citizens in the district? That's kind of where I'm at on. Them are the three bills, three things that I'm kind of working here locally. You know, I do represent Cuba as well in Crawford County. I had some people in Steelville. They're interested in trying to. There's a railroad going from Cuba all the way to Bixby. They've contacted me. They would like to see that done, which I think would stimulate the economy. And there's no rail there.
Yeah, it's already been removed.
That's been removed, and the way I understand it, none of that land has went back to the landowners yet. I mean, or I don't know what so it wouldn't be a property rights issue like we're seeing across the state, like the one here in Salem. You know, they've already given it back. They've already fenced a bunch of that stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
So trying to go back in and take that back, I would be opposed to that, taking the land rights. But if the land hasn't been given back and Burlington Northern still owns that land, it would be a good.
It's an easement. That's all it is. They don't own it. It's an easement.
So the easement they would be able to use from Cuba to Steelville would be a great bike path, and you know, bring tourism to that area. I have some people talk to me about that. Bourbon, been talked to Bourbon in the last few years. Or Bourbon Economic Development. They'd love to put a sports complex in over there. I mean, they're in a prime location between Cuba and Sullivan. I mean, it's 7 miles from basically 8 miles from each one. They're, you know, so they're trying to enhance their community as well, and I want to do everything I can on that. I don't, you know, that's just some of the things I've been talking to them about. If I can help, I can help, you know. So them are just kind of the things that's starting. And I do want to say that I've learned a lot in the last 2.5 years. And I didn't work as hard. I went to events, you know, went during interim, you know, from May to December. But this year I plan on trying to get to Jeff City and sitting down with the governor, with the staff up there, and with the budget chairs, and with people about how do I do better, because in session you're fighting 163 people.
Exactly.
You know, I want to see what we can do, what I can get done during the interim, instead of trying to do it all in January, February, March, April, and May. I mean,
you know, and sometimes what you're talking about is and help whatever way you can. Sometimes that's just a letter of support that they may need to get a grant.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes that makes the difference.
I mean, it's amazing how people deal with something for 2 months, and they call my office about a Social Security issue or this and that, and I make a phone call, and they get a phone call back within 2 or 3 days. It's taken care of. I think that's injustice of our state and how they do business. But, you know, I have no problem if you have issues. You know, the tax form, gas tax form, everybody's wanting that gas tax form refund. So you contact my office, I send it to them, and they have it, and they know how to look into it. I mean, that's part of probably the biggest thing I need, that I focus on. Legislation's important, I think, but taking care of the constituents' issues is more. You know, I get four phone calls yesterday, right, about Senate bills and this, and I try to make it a point to get back that day or the day after, because people, it's important to them, you know, and I know that once it's taken care of, it's taken care of, right? So they don't sit there and stew and think I'm not calling them back or something.
If they wouldn't have called you if it wasn't important, you know, or they had a question or concern, because a lot of times, just like you say, in legal verbiage sometimes is very vague, and it's done that way almost intentionally because, as you well know, and I know, sometimes you just can't put down in black and white exactly what it's going to be because times change. And as times change, you got to have a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah, you're right. But no, I appreciate coming in here. I want to do everything I can to get information out. I mean, I think that's our politics. People watch the news, they get bits and pieces of this extreme or this extreme. I just want to be straight up front in what's going on, and you contact my office, and if you have questions about bills, I can get a summary of it so you kind of have an idea, you know, and people need to be involved, you know, so, I mean.
We should. So it's going to affect them sooner or later.
You know, I appreciate it, and I do want to, before we leave, I definitely want to thank you, Stan, for all your contributions to the community. I know I was unable to come to the event at the ball game when you were honored the other day, and I had a resolution for you, but I couldn't get down here to give it, and I wanted to give it, right?
Okay.
So I'll take a little bit of time and kind of read it off there if you don't mind. This is
No,
kind of,
I don't
want to
mind.
present this to Stan from the House of Representatives for his accomplishments and his contributions to the community. So I got to slow down on this. So.
Okay.
This is from Missouri House of Representatives resolution. Whereas the members of the Missouri House of Representatives proudly pause to recognize Stan Podorsky, an esteemed resident of Salem, Missouri, who is celebrating 40 years of exceptional service and dedication to KSMO media. And whereas during his impressive tenure, Stan Podorsky has provided the Salem community with radio and printed coverage of local news. And whereas Stan Podorsky has done play-by-play announcing of Salem high school sports, including volleyball, football, basketball, baseball, and softball on KSMO Media. And whereas the general manager of KSMO Media, Stan Podorsky, is known by his many fans as Stan Stevens. I didn't know that. I always knew it as Stan the Man, right? On air, and hockey, and University of Missouri Sports and Information. I skipped something there. Whereas KSMO Media is Ozark home of the Salem Tiger Sports, St. Louis Cardinals Baseball, St. Louis Blues Hockey, and University of Missouri Sports and Information. And whereas KSMO Media broadcasts 5 local newscasts and provides the free Your World Today publication to more than 30 locations in Dent County. And whereas Stan Podorsky has introduced visual live streaming of Salem high school sports to the community on social media, has provided live streaming on numerous community events such as Salem high school graduation, has served on several community boards and organizations, and live streams this broadcast. I got to throw that wasn't on there, right? Now therefore it be resolved that we, the members of the Missouri House of Representatives 102nd General Assembly, join in extending our most heartily appreciation to Stan Podorsky for his 40 years of service to KSMO Media, and in further wishing him continued success in all future endeavors.
Well,
thanks,
thank you.
Stan.
Thank you,
Thanks
Ron.
for all you
Appreciate
do.
it.
I'll hand that over to him. So,
Well, thank you.
So, appreciate what you do. It is a vital thing to the community what you do, and it is very well appreciated. I mean, getting the news out, fair and balanced news, I guess you'd say, fair news and to the community. So
we try and do. Try and be impartial. Just tell what the facts are, and then let people make their decisions. And if they got questions, that's what it's supposed to do. You don't understand it, call and ask, and it's a great way to get more informed on your own, and in a way you'll understand. I mean, I could sit here and we can talk all day long about something, and it doesn't mean somebody's going to understand exactly what we're saying. But if they would sit down with one of us and say, okay, where did you get that information, or where's that detail coming from? Well, then we can explain to them where it is.
Well, I appreciate you letting me come in and talk, and if anybody wants to contact my office, feel free to contact my office. It's on my webpage at ron.copeland@house.mo.gov. Phone numbers 573-751-1688. Feel free to contact about your concerns and issues. Get back to you as soon as you can. If I don't, I probably won't answer the phone. My assistant will. She's very good at getting me the information and getting it back. But if you have a question or concern, don't hesitate to ask. That's what I'm there for. That's what I was elected to do, and I want to do that as best I can. So.
Well, we really appreciate your hard work and efforts, and I think it's starting to show up more and more in the bills that are being passed, that your influence is, well, you're getting more influence, let's put it that way,
Right.
in what's going on in our state, which helps, and it helps our area to improve as well. Ron, we really thank
That's
you
my
for
goal.
that.
So thank you, Stan.
Thank you very much. Want to appreciate and thank Ron Copeland for his time to come in, and we hope you enjoyed our interview today, and we'll do it again soon, I'm sure, with Representative Ron Copeland here on KSMO Media.
And it's live streamed, right? Okay. Thank you.